Hello and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha,
I'm Jared.
And I'm Chris.
and this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. We are working our way through Chrysalids by John Wyndam. This is the second of a two-part discussion series of this book. It's also an SF masterwork, so we'll talk about it again in about 10 years. and um, I think we stopped at about chapter 10 last week, and this week is chapters 11 through, I think, 17 was the end of the book. 11 through the end of the book. Short story for today is I scrolled too much. Mondocane by Jacques Barberi. And because we finished the book, we will be continuing on with Redemption Arc next week, which is the second book in the inhibitor phase. Inhibitors trilogy. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, is the book following Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. We're going to be going up to chapter 6, was it, Chris?
Yeah, 1 to 6 inclusive, yeah. So
1 to 6.
at the end of 6.
That's how far we'll go for our next discussion. And the short story for next week is Blood Music by Greg Bear. And we are continuing our way through the big book of science fiction for all of this. I think we'll go through that at least to the end of the year, if not longer. But we are starting to see some names we recognize, like Greg Bear, for instance, Octavia Butler's coming up after that. Yeah, anyway, lots of exciting stuff to look forward to. How did we feel about the end of Chrysalids?
Good book. Yeah, I liked it. I'm not sure if the second half lived up to the potential of the first half, but maybe I was expecting too much as well. So I dialed it back a little bit on my expectations, and I reflected a little bit, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's a pretty solid book overall, and pretty interesting considering it was written in 1955, and it seems like there was a lot of books written then that were worried about mutation or telepathy or something along those lines. It very much reminded me of some of the themes that come up later on in Stan Lee's X-Men, and I just got that kind of vibe, and so I was just I really liked that exploration of once all the kids figured out how to communicate with each other better, how to use their powers a little better. You ended up with the chosen child who was more powerful than the rest of them and stuff like that. And that, of course, all that reminded me of all that X-Men stuff, and wondering if Stan Lee was influenced by this book at all. But it was kind of almost a Deus Ex Machina when the other people with the flying spaceship came in and
absolutely
kind of came down and said, "Hey, we are. Come on, everybody, get on board. Going to the promised land." And so that was. He was telegraphing it because he was, they were in contact with him. You were kind of
pun intended.
What's that?
Telegraphing, pun intended.
Yeah. Yes. I like the whole New Zealand thing. That was kind of interesting. And but there was a lot of other stuff came up though with the themes of the deeper conversations about other people, other societies, other ways of looking at things, and how it got turned around that our main character, what was his name again?
David,
yes. How it got turned around that his society was actually the ones that were the exception.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of the world. And we weren't we would kind of weren't led to believe that in the first half of the book at all. And I liked how he kind of twisted that around too. So very interesting book, very, especially for the time it was written. It's very um, a lot of stuff was explored. I thought in that
Yeah.
manner. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, Jared. In fact, I have to say, by the time we had about, I think the period from 50 to 75% of this book where we left off to kind of where they get captured, I suppose, at that stage, I thought was incredibly exciting. I was really excited about where that was going. In fact, as they were being chased on one end to try and get to basically the unknown. And a bit like I said, I think it fell flat a little bit after that. I think they spent half of the book setting up the evils of their original society, and then about 15 pages of setting up the evils of progression, if you know what I mean. It sort of felt a bit rushed, I think, at the end. I think we'll probably come back and talk about that. But it did strike me as the kind of story up to that point that I couldn't believe was not a major motion picture made every 10 years of some sort, because there was such drive, that chase part, that bit where they're on the run, the six toes, I suppose you could say sort of the X-Men films are a representation of that, as you quite rightly say. It's very pretty much exactly the same themes that they're in. Maybe they're waiting until the Chrysalids 2055 till it goes out of into the public domain or something before we get a whole slew of Chrysalids adaptations or something of that form. But I really did enjoy that drive and that bit of the panic that was faced in, especially with the idea that the people who were in the non-deviated society would have woke up and all their kids would have been gone. You know what I mean? And how does that affect that society? This guy who's the head of Walknock, the head of the farm, the head of the region, had basically lost all of his kids, and was sort of the implication that they'd lost other kids along the way to deviation along that stage, and then the two healthy ones had gone. Again, I would have liked to have seen a little bit of exploration of actually what that meant to him and the wife and that kind of stuff in it. So I think, I mean, it was right. It was the right length though as well, because I think if it had went in there and expounded on that for another 50 pages, I think I would have lost the steam. It sort of got to the point that we got the rescue at the end, and that was okay. We're done with that, because I think the rescue part, again, I had to remind myself that it was 1955 this was written, and actually the technology that they had about how they rescued them and all of that kind of stuff it seems okay by today's standards, not to, but it's very inventive for that time, and especially the idea of the meetings, and the world was kind of in the throes of still reeling from the advent of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and stuff like that. This advent of nuclear power was going to wipe out and cause great problems for society. So that bit was very cool, and yeah, definitely looking forward to reading more Wyndam. There's no doubt he has a succinct, propulsive, and inventive style about how he tells the stories, especially telling it through the eyes of the children in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last part was pretty action packed, and I really liked the rallying around Petra. She was kind of, I mean, we barely got much of her, but somehow the way her character was set up, I adored her, and was help. I wanted to rally for her and take care of her and everything like they were doing, which was interesting. What did you all think of the what was it called, the Fringe Society, and how that was set up?
Yeah, I enjoyed that's the setup of the French society, because it wasn't like they were escaping to this society because um they wanted to be with this society that was different, and they were also very protective of their own space. And it wasn't like, when you got introduced to them, you didn't feel like anybody was safe. They definitely had their own agenda, and they they weren't exactly like welcoming right off the bat. And so like they took them captive, right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was interesting that you had the villages of would you say Nuktuk, whatever that was,
Waknuk.
Waknuk. uh, you had you had them, bearing down upon this territory where the fringe people lived, and of course you had the spy in amongst them, which I thought was brilliant. I like that. I
Hmm.
like that part. Um, whether he could tell them all their movements and stuff like that, and that was really cool. I thought. But yeah, but I liked how the fringe society just wasn't automatically the opposite of Waknuk. It was just different, and they had their own foibles. They had their own flaws and stuff in their society, and so I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't. I sort of expected, actually, that at some stage that they would get the French society and it would be another utopian society of some case. But I think Wyndham, to his great credit, kind of shows and really thinks about the flaws of that society in its own right. Because, but when they get there, they're only really interested, or certainly his father's brother's only interested in mating. Is that in the keeping the females? He's not interested in more males to do the work or otherwise. It's very much about them all almost kind of breeding a new attractive society. This kind of idea that even though they were sort of deviants in their own way, that they were still sort of conforming to attraction and all of the things that norm society would as well. People without deviation, people that looked kind of aesthetically beautiful, that kind of stuff. And then how that played out with Sophie actually when they returned, when she was then stand aside. She was very put out by the fact that she was not the center of attention anymore, coming from a society, where that excluded her, and then being. I thought that was very interesting. Without, again, like Wyndham did beforehand, he didn't spell it out. He just kind of left those kind of things just there and left you to sit with them, and basically let you to sit with them while everybody was hiding in a cave, which it
Yeah,
was its own little way, because again, that them not being able to see things but seeing things through the eyes of somebody else's thoughts was again a really inventive way to see the world and see the prejudice and the things that were around the world. In that case, kind of rallying messages home. So I thought that was very clever.
There was also the other side of it with Rosalind, when she freaks out about how strange looking the man is, and they call him Spider Man and everything. And so they are on the run for being considered deviants,
Mhm.
but they don't seem to have the necessary sympathy or compassion for the corresponding fringe people. I mean, that said, he wanted to force her, but so she is not wrong to feel, I guess, some fear and hatred of him. But her reasons felt like, I mean, that felt like, again, Wyndham making a point that any opportunity to see different or find fault in others, I think that just tends to happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I liked that. I liked how it was very much a gray area. There wasn't a fine line drawn about who's a deviant and who's not, and how people view different deviants from their own deviancy and all that stuff. And it was all very gray and all very individualistic, like, as far as, just because this guy's deviant doesn't mean he's a good person, and what have you. And so it was, he did a pretty good job about making sure that all these characters were people first, with all their flaws, and then they were in a society or a grouping.
Yeah, but they were still products of the society they were brought up in, that
Yep.
kind of nature versus nurture thing, you know. And I think that's probably true. It does feel like a distinctly political novel in a lot of ways. I think it says some things about people's liberal thoughts, that you can have liberal ideals, but actually the reality of that and how you live and progress through your life can be challenged by your circumstances. And actually, people should have to be given the space to kind of have very strong ideals, but actually in practicality be different. And so people, they sort of had these ideas that they were all good people, because you got to remember we were introduced to this idea of deviancy through Sophie, who literally had an extra toe. Like, there wasn't a big difference, if you know what I mean. And David postulates the idea that she seems like a good person. Her family seem like good people, like they're not that different from us. But actually extend that further into, somebody that looks deformed in a more obvious way, and they're not quite so strong about kind of where the line is anymore. And I think that's very true of just humanity in general. What we are exposed to, and what we see in our everyday life, and being challenged by things that are different from it. I think was, while progressive for 1955, I think is still quite progressive in ideals and kind of thoughts today.
Yeah, very X-Men.
Extremely. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
didn't I say it was the uncle who killed him?
Yes, 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 it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
I
you
got one.
called it.
Yeah. We never get any resolution to Uncle Axel either. I think that was,
Yeah.
I mean, not necessary to say, but he had taken such a large part in them basically trying to escape and getting ready and protecting them. And then he was almost just kind of forgotten about, if you know what I mean, which, sad in one way, but I suppose a reality in another.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, he was the classic um, you know, I've done as much as I can character.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
up to you now,
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting how central the uncle turned out to be, and it made sense though, like it
Yeah.
that he was protecting them, and he knew that Alan was going to tell everyone or try to use it to some advantage. But there was also, I think, he's done a lot with this book. There's also that, I guess, the slight toxicity of the relationship. I think that, uh, what was her name? Anne had with Alan, because she trusted him and uh, told him her secrets, and he wasn't going to put it to good use. And
No.
I think he probably even wanted to hurt her. And so, yeah, that was interesting too. I think the uncle says something about women like her who sort of basically just their identity is tied to the man, and so they trust him even when he doesn't deserve it. Like, I don't know much about that psychology of it all, but I think the portrayal of that relationship there, that was interesting too.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah, it was. And I also there was also the relationship, just little bit shown that what's her name? Oh, crap, I always forget names. Rosalind, that her mother knew
Yes.
about her, and she helped her pack. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay. See, not everybody's insane in this place. So it's like,
Yeah.
and we contrast that with David's mother, who probably knew as well, but then was totally in denial or was totally subservient to the to the pogrom of the place she lived in. And so whereas Rosalind's mother was like, yeah, I'm going to help her escape, and so you see that difference.
Yeah, and the fact that David's mother also lost a sister, being
Yeah.
powerless in at that end, kind of real showing that she really couldn't do anything about it, regardless of what if she knew or she didn't. There's literally nothing could happen, in that regard. It's sort of sad. And then I liked the exploration of how all the kids were treated differently. Like the two kids that they found to start off with, how they were tortured and possibly killed for information, about and the realization, even of David as a young man, to realize that they're only doing this because they're terrified of us. They're terrified of actually what it means that there's so many of us hiding in plain sight, that they work together, that this is the future of the race, and kind of how that fed into the actions of society. They were killing children, essentially torturing children, uh, because they really couldn't see any other way to protect their society in that way, and the kind of darkness that leaves, and how that filtered through to the children because it was like we can't reach her anymore. Just quiet. We got a lot of this talk. Maybe they're sleeping. This kind of things that kids would say to themselves to protect themselves. But maybe they're just tired. Maybe they're just sleeping. Rather than deal with the realities of what the situation was in a very childlike way. I really like that whole exploration of that side of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was also the bit about David when he, for the longest time, didn't ask Michael if his father was among the people chasing them down. That was just so sad, especially when it turned out eventually that he was there,
Was.
and there was no hope for this man or this relationship. Mm, that, especially in light of the fact that Rosalind's mother helped her back and escape, and that the father's mother, she helped his brother escape and live a decent life.
Hmm.
They, well, as decent as you can get in the fringes, I guess, but at least he knows that his family loved him. But David and Petra don't have that. Mm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And and it was interesting too how Wyndham presented us this society that New Zealand being a society that persisted or subsisted upon always knowing each other's thoughts. How they
Hmm.
actually thought it was strange that these other people they're encountering aren't used to this yet. You know, and that's I wonder. He didn't explore it too much. He just mentioned that it exists, um, and he leaves it very open ended that in the book that this is going to be a better, safer place for all involved.
Hmm.
But you got to wonder if there was also something he would have needed a bigger book obviously to explore any problems that might arise because of that. It wouldn't be. He leaves it open ended as a sort of a utopia type place, but um, I would be interested to see if he's ever written anything else that explores the other side of that.
Hmm.
There's one immediate problem, right? Just from the characters in this book, Petra can do some level of control over the people in her and radius, and she has a pretty large radius, and she's going to a place where there are so many people who can hear thoughts and maybe be controlled by her,
Yeah,
which, yeah, I want that book.
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, because they were there for her. That's
Hmm.
their main reason for going. They
Yeah.
had seen power like that, and that's just like right there. I mean, the whole time I'm like, oh, there's Professor X and Magneto going after the most powerful mutant child, you know. But
Well, I was going to say that this is basically the story of Stranger Things as well, which is very much in the zeitgeist at the moment as well.
sure,
Very,
yeah,
very similar kind of idea, but the special child and kind of trying to capture and use that for your own effects. I did like the fact that it painted this idea because we throughout most of the second half of the book we have this idea that they're going to be saved by the people from New Zealand. New Zealand, it's a Z. It's not an S. It's definitely a Z. I like that part. Um, even though she didn't know letters. But that when they did come and arrive, there was almost a threat there to themselves that they were going away into the unknown a bit, like you said. That didn't seem like a utopian society. It felt like a very restrictive society. The people were being bred for the betterness of society. They were basically taking this girl Petra to make her a mother. So that was kind of she was going to be bred as that, and I think there were warning signs in that
mm,
actually is that evolution. They were talking about they were killing these people off because they would die. They didn't have long life. This wasn't their world anymore. That being kind of almost committing genocide
mm,
and making that judgment on people, which I thought was incredibly dark for a happy ending. In a lot of ways, they weren't concerned about things in the past, and at the same stage, they were taking them away into an unknown where they only really wanted Petra. David and Rosalind were going along for the ride because they could help control her over the journey. but they really didn't want David and Rosalind, even though they were of their people.
Yeah.
There was like an inherent threat through the end of the book that kind of left it sitting very unfulfilled. I think, as you say, you sort of want to read that book, Varsha, which is again, why is this not a TV series? Because there's your series 2 and series 3. If they can make a
Yes.
book series out of the Man in the High Castle, and we'll get to read that one day quite soon, and you'll be like, how did they turn that into series upon series? This book, I think, is ripe for further exploration. I think in that way, and for people to really take a run at.
Yeah. Great points. Great points. Yeah. It's just.
Yeah. What What did you think about the absolute ending where Michael and I forget who, Rachel, are
Rachel,
going
yeah,
to make their way around the world to get to New Zealand? I really like that because now that they know that there's something better for them, they would rather brave all the terrible things that the world may throw at them to try and get there. Um, which it was really scary to venture out into the fringes, even, but now they want to go through all the bad lands and blasted zones and whatnot to try and find their way to New Zealand, knowing that there's a place for them. So I kind of really like that sort of uplifting note that it ended on.
yeah. It ends on a like an almost globalization kind of idea. Is the fact that they know that there's other people, there's somewhere to go, because before they outside Waknock, they really didn't know. Everywhere was danger around them. There was nowhere
Yeah.
to hit to. There's nowhere for the society to aim for, and especially because they will be outsiders within their own society, they can start to plan for the future. And it might not be Michael and Rachel to make it; it might be their kids. But
Mm,
at least there will be a drive for that part of society to, have children and make their way across. They've no real plan of how to do it, but the fact that they know that it's there is strong. Like, you think of how many science fiction fantasy stories are very much based on the idea of a prophecy, because that's basically what this is. Our ancestors told us that there would be this, place that's a utopia, that we'd get there and we'd be home. That's so many at the core of so many fantasy and sci-fi stories of a sort that people are using that kind of dream.
And mythologies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, that's
Sorry.
interesting. Prophecy, the connection to prophecy and a bit of a promised land thing. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So I did like that, but I did like the fact that Michael was like, I'm going to go back and live a normal life, so to speak. And in some ways, but like I sort of alluded to, you're not sure whether Michael's outcome might be better than David's and Rosalind's. There's a sort of the leaders of that society were chasing and are now dead. So by the time they go back to Waknock, there's not much left there apart from the women and Rachel and Michael. Here, Michael might be one of the you know, older kids, so to speak, that can start to repopulate that society. So that inherently just changes that society by the very nature of it. And I think again, it's the book I want to read. I want to read that next book as well. Both sides. There's
Yeah.
another 2 novels there.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got a spin-off series and everything out of this. Good
Oh
God,
yeah.
we could
That's
make
a lot.
millions.
Yeah.
Let's hire a director.
Yeah. Well, we also need to keep giving our thoughts. Stop giving our thoughts away here, so that people can steal them.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. I like there were quite a few areas where he kind of does a little bit of ex, explanation type thing where that hits us over the head a little bit about some of the
hmm
themes. He really gets into the this idea that the living form defies evolution at its peril. It does not
yes,
adapt. It will be broken. Um, the idea of completed man is a supreme vanity. The finished image is a sacrilegious myth. And that's when somebody was telling David that the old people weren't the great people that he thought they were and stuff. Um, and so just the whole idea that change is always going, is always happening, and you don't have this ideal to strive for. Evolution is change, and it will continue on no matter what people do, no matter what the world, no matter what's happening in the world. And that was a very heavy theme in the book that was kind of reinstated over and over again, and actually spelled out quite a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. The tyranny of trying to be like the old people, the tyranny of trying to follow tradition. And I think, uh, Chris, did you do the audiobook for this one at all? No?
No, not at all. No.
The 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 narrator used a really strange voice for the New Zealand woman. I don't know if you ever got her name. So it sounded like this really weird preachy uh tone that she used to say the things she did. I thought she made some interesting points, but the way they were said, I was like, it's interesting how how the way something is said might change how you feel about it. But yeah.
Well, all you gotta do is, just call me up and I'll read it to you,
Yeah.
and you'll get a different viewpoint.
Yes. I'll do that next time.
Sort of strangely prophetic as well is that well, we've just been through COVID. New Zealand was the place that pretty much survived COVID the best, and that sort of utopian society, and yet it's presented in this book. Like, how the hell does John Wyndham know that New Zealand would be this sort of hotbed for progression and for looking after people and public health and all of that kind of stuff? Although, like I say, I'm not sure that's exactly what it's saying at the end, but
Yeah. Well, it was New Zealand, not New Zealand.
yeah.
And they skipped the new. They said two-part name and then they forgot about the first part.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just
Petra couldn't
Sealand.
do letters. She was too young.
Yeah, it's just too little.
Very
Right.
interesting.
Anything else before we get to the short story, which I forgot to read?
Yeah, you're right. It was a very rushed ending.
Hmm.
At the end of it, I was just looking through it, and I'm like, he gets captured on page 185, and there's only or 175, whatever, and it's only like so much left. And then Sealand shows up, and everything's they're all whisked off. But yeah, overall, a nice read. I really enjoyed it. It was good.
It's another one for the famous sci-fi authors we've read a book of now. I've seen plenty of interpretations of his other works, certainly on film, but actually to read it in this form is really illuminating. Not this particular story seen in other forms, but yeah, it's cool. Look forward to reading more of his.
Yeah.
Right, on to the short story.
Oh yeah, this thing.
Mondocane. Oh man, normally I do the synopsis of this, but I mean it's only 3 pages to go from. What I'll say is that basically it talks about a dystopian future and about the ways that humanity will evolve to cope with the dystopian future. In my eyes, that's sort of what I read it as, and that there was one man's death that led to the progress. They talk about this. I was actually trying to remember, when was the last time we talked about homunculi?
Good question. I don't know.
I think it was who's the author we don't like from the SF Masterworks? James Blish story, wasn't it?
Blish. Was it Blish?
Oh, was he the
They had
ones
some like microscopic beings that
but that's not totally ringing a bell with me, but it could well be. It's definitely the idea of homunculus.
Yeah.
Could be. Well, I was thinking more of actually one of the masterworks, something like Bester or something like that might have had homunculi in it. But anyway, so they talk about this kind of idea, this kind of humanity will become this kind of homogenous being, that will live in tunnels, that will kind of create a network and things to get around. To me, it was a sprawling set of ideas and kind of thoughts rather than a cohesive short story, if you know what I mean. In some way, it didn't read like that to me, certainly anyway. But it had some cool ideas within it. But recall and
Uh,
splitting together is not going to be my forte in this discussion.
I thought the whole process of expansion compression was quite ridiculous. uh, and it's too bad because like the first few lines here, there was some really interesting lines. Like the war had left behind her a bleeding and swollen earth. And I was like, okay, there's some
That's cool.
there's a war that happened. You're like, oh, okay, what's going to be we getting into here? And then nobody knew what really happened. A slippage of forces and uncontrollable hatred. And I was like, oh wow, that's a pretty good line. And
Mm.
then it just got crazy and silly.
Yeah.
It got really silly. you know, little people climbing on top of big people's clothes, and it got really silly.
Yeah.
uh, so I it really lost me. And then this guy Anton Raven dies and crushed by his own coat and hat, and then it's supposed to save everybody somehow. I don't get it. I didn't get it at all.
Yeah.
I don't think we should let French people write science fiction.
That seems like a very, yeah. What I'm
Being a French descent,
charged,
like
charged statement. Yeah. Dear me.
I'm only a French
Yeah.
Canadian, so I'll be all right.
Okay, we're okay then. Uh, but you did relocate then. You know what I mean? Just like the people in the story. They climbed the mountains to escape the rising tides and all of that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It was all
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
Were the mountains covered by clothes?
In some cases,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really weird.
I don't think it'll be going on the greatest stories of the year list. I have to say.
Sounds like it.
I mean, if it had have been, I don't know, with a little tweaking, I think it could go into the realm of like Cordwainer Smith type thing, But you'd have to have Smith's sense of strangeness added to it somehow.
Yeah. Genius is the word you're looking there for.
Yeah, you'd need Smith's genius. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Chris's unbiased opinions of Cordwainer Smith coming through.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'm not even sure whether it's true. I just went on such a journey with that book. I don't know. I went from this is utter bobbins to being, but this actually all links together and is maybe amazing. Yeah.
Maybe amazing.
If you could
Maybe
link-
not.
yeah, if you could link this story to that universe somehow,
Yeah.
it would make more sense.
We're not a winner.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think
Right. Sounds like that's all we have to say about this short story.
Yeah.
Are we ready to wrap up? Okay.
Yeah.
So, once again, we'll be reading Redemption Arc next week. We'll start our way through that. How many weeks are we
I
doing
think
that
it's
for, Chris?
6. It's about
6
100
weeks.
pages per week. The last
Mm.
week, week 6 has got about 130 pages with no short story. So
Okay, nice. So, yeah, we're going to be doing that in 6 installments. And just in case, because we like doing this, we spun the wheel. So, we're going to be reading Solaris by, I think, Stanislaw Lem. Is that how you say his
Stanislav
name?
Lem, yeah.
Mm-hmm. After Redemption Arc. We may decide to continue on with the trilogy, finish it, or we might decide to stop there. It's all up in the air, but we will be reading Redemption Arc. And the short story for next week was Blood Music by Greg Bear. Nice.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.